It says that I'm live, but I don't believe it. We'll wait a second to find out. So it looks like we got 3 people in here. I might actually even be able to see the comment section this time. Okay, let's minimize this. And okay, so hey, my name is Eron, and today I'm going to do a little bit of an Anarchy AMA. I got a few questions that didn't get answered from the last time I did a Q&A. So today we're going to do basically another Q&A to kind of answer some of those questions. And then afterwards, I'm going to answer some live questions from all of you. And just like the last time, if you want your question answered first, send a super chat and we'll get to those as a priority, and we'll also answer all of the other questions as well. So before I get started, just to make sure I'm coming through okay, everybody can hear and see me just fine. I'm going to assume it's probably yes. Nobody's complained yet. Okay, let's just assume that it's yes. All right, so we're going to start with my first question, and it's going to be asked off screen by my partner, The Darkness, who is hiding in the darkness just behind the camera. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
In an ANCOM society, what would happen if some people don't desire to follow a communist economic style? Like if you have a city that follows a communist economic system, but some people disagree with that and move to start their own city. They don't harm you, nor do they harm anyone else. They merely just have a different approach to society. How would or should an ANCOM or ANCOM society handle it?
So essentially, the question is, if we have an anarcho-communist structured society and there are other little societies that exist outside of that, such as mutualist or small capitalist societies or whatever, how would anarcho-communists handle that? So I think that's a really good question. I know that the more authoritarian communists, the way that they handled that sort of thing within their borders was they essentially made a lot of things like, I think it was usury, but basically trading and that sort of thing for money illegal. And they criminalized it. They put those people in prison and did a lot of other things, sometimes very, very bad things. Anarchists don't necessarily agree with that 100%. Obviously, you want to make sure that capitalists and whoever after the revolution aren't able to flourish and take down essentially everything that you've built. So you would have to do certain things to make that, to handle that sort of thing, maybe using a certain amount of military to make sure that the capitalists weren't able to use their connections and any hidden wealth to acquire property or land or whatever. But if we were to say have an anarchist society that had some sort of border that was, that nobody had a choice in the matter, there had to be a border around it because other countries didn't want to do that, then I think that the anarchists would hopefully try to work with the other countries and try to persuade them non-coercively, or try to persuade the people of those countries non-coercively to take the same action as they did, try to form an international proletariat revolution. I think that would be the best case scenario. And as far as small pockets of whatever groups, mutualist or whatever, still existing, I don't really think that any society that functions under a capitalistic or a market economy would exist very long, as long as the predominant ideology throughout the entire area is anarchistic, because people, they're not going to look at wage labor or wage slavery as a beneficial thing. They're going to look at that as being like a bad thing. So they'll usually want to work in a more anarchistic way anyway. And most of the time, to hold together a lot of those societies, you need to have coercion. And being that anarchists or anarcho-communists are inherently against that sort of thing, in some cases, we would probably fight against it.
Here's an interesting philosophical concept for you, Eron, and it would be fascinating to hear your thoughts on this. Morals, all correct moral laws, derive from the instinct to survive. Moral behavior is survival behavior above the individual level.
So Is everybody able to hear the questions just fine when they're coming through, or do I need to kind of repeat them? Because I think that they're probably coming through just fine. I'm just going to assume that they're coming through just fine. So my position on morality, I've had a lot of different thoughts about morality over the course of a few years. I think that morals are not necessarily 100% learned and 100% intrinsic to human nature. I think that it's an amalgamation of both. And I think depending on the different society that you live in, you might have certain morals or certain things that you believe that are going to be different than others. So I don't necessarily think that all morals come out of our ancient past or come out of our evolution. I think that some things definitely could be learned. But yeah, that's basically what I think about morals, is that I think that it's an amalgamation of a lot of different things all at once. I don't necessarily believe in moral absolutes. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true. I think that some things are more or less moral absolutes, like our view on rape or murder or that sort of thing. I think that more or less a moral absolute would be trying to achieve health and well-being and reduce pain and suffering. That would probably be a moral absolute, even though that's more or less vague as to what those could mean. And I think that rape and murder definitely fall into the category of creating more harm and reducing health and well-being. So I think that almost all the time, those can be kind of looked at as being bad. Rape specifically, murder during war, not usually looked at as being as bad, though.
Do you have any advice for new and aspiring YouTubers?
Yeah. If you are a new aspiring YouTuber, just grab your phone. Your phone has a built-in camera, a built-in microphone. Lean it up against a cup on your dresser and just, sit down, talk to the camera, and talk about things that you know. That's the best way to be entertaining online, is to just tell people things that you already have a good understanding of. It's really, really annoying and really bad when you start speaking as though you have an authority on something when you really don't actually have any idea how the thing works or what the thing is or what you're talking about at all.
What are your thoughts on Kronstadt?
On Kronstadt?
Yeah.
I have views, but that's a history question, and I'd have to go into detail on history, and I might get something wrong. So I'm just going to jump that one.
What's the difference between structure and hierarchy? Are anarchists anti-structure? How can we organize without structure or hierarchy?
Anarchists are not anti-structure. I think that anarchists prefer to have very structured, very organized societies, because if you don't have structure and organization and you're working with a large group of people without definite leaders telling everyone what to do, things fall into chaos very quickly. You'll have something known as chaos of the majority, where there's so many people with so many different ideas and so forth, that you need to have some sort of structure or basis for everybody to basically work off of. A lot of the different projects that we work on with my group, we usually try to maintain a very strict structure, sometimes almost too strict. Sometimes it makes volunteers a little bit, I don't know, not necessarily annoyed, but it definitely requires a certain type of volunteer to work on one of those projects, because there's a certain amount of structure that we need to adhere to make sure that everything works smoothly, everything works well, nothing is left to question, and that sort of thing. And most of the structure really comes out of the democratic method, through working with people and finding out what works best and how to do things in the best possible way, and then using that again and again to move forward.
What do you think about market socialism? Do you think democratic control over an economy can lead to an ethical system, or do you think that markets in themselves always lead to an unethical society?
Yeah, I would say the latter. I would say that almost inevitably. Okay, so market socialism is a different way of saying that essentially you have a welfare state, right, that takes care of its people in various different ways, but also you still maintain a certain amount of freedom to buy and sell goods and that sort of thing. And usually there's a strict, usually there's a strict amount of control over that entire system. So it's a lot harder for businesses to do something like make people work 14-hour days without compensating them properly and that sort of thing. And I think that that's good. I think it's better than what we have. And I think that it would be useful. But at the same time, the intrinsic nature of a market always ends up leading back to a certain small percentage of people gaining more and more wealth, the rich getting richer, while the vast majority of people lose their wealth and end up worse off. And no matter what you have, no matter what market you have, as long as you're relying on a market system, it's going to try to trend in that direction. You've seen the same thing in China that is happening right now, where the market is, to a certain extent, dominating the political sphere, right? Capitalism is growing in China. The Belt and Road Initiative is kind of spreading Chinese capitalism across the world. And you also see a similar thing happening in Scandinavian countries, in that where they've moved further and further away from their perfect welfare state system, and they started to take into consideration more business interests in that. And that's just the inherent trend of the way capital works. It always works to filter itself out through into smaller and smaller amounts of hands. So yeah, I don't think that market socialism is necessarily a good end goal. I think that it is a way of transitioning through to something that some socialists want to get to. But I don't necessarily think that it works very well as an end goal. Actually, I think that it would inevitably revert back to capitalism. And also, we have to take into consideration the heavy use of worker cooperatives in those sorts of systems, in market socialism, where worker cooperatives are really, really good as they are, but they still basically move to the ebbs and flows of the capitalist system. So they're still going to be hit with market fluctuations. They're still going to be susceptible to market crashes. Larger cooperatives could employ smaller cooperatives to work for them to produce, essentially creating another division of classes. So there's a lot of different problems, and I think that it would take an entire hour-long video to really suss through it. But yeah, there are problems.
I just want to make sure that people can hear me asking questions, because somebody said that they have to turn up the volume really high to hear me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If you can't hear my partner making or asking questions, then I can repeat the question.
I can also just sit here.
Yeah, if you're going to be close. Well, you just have to be speaking into the microphone. It's kind of a directional microphone.
Yeah, okay. I think we're good.
Oh, watch out.
Okay. Are you being Mao-pilled?
No, I'm not being Mao-pilled. I do like Mao for the writing that he does. He still does. He's still writing. He's out there. He's like Elvis. He's never died. I like Mao for his writing, but I don't think that anything that he says supersedes the anarchist ways of thinking about hierarchy and about decentralization. I think that those are fundamental tenets to how I view socialism, and some of the things that I believe are intrinsic and necessary to actually create a true, real revolution in the future. Without having decentralization and a strict control over hierarchical structures, I think that we're just going to continue to reproduce the same unjust systems that we've seen in the past. So I like Mao, but no, I'm not getting Mao-pilled.
What do you think should be done about addictive drugs in the future? Obviously, there is a place for pain management, but would the destruction of certain things, if it could be democratically agreed on, be just?
The destruction of drugs, is that what that question is saying?
Would the destruction of certain things, if it could be democratically agreed on, be just?
Okay, so like, I mean, if everybody democratically agreed, okay, when it comes to this sort of thing, the masses, this is when you'd end up having a problem with majority rule, right? Because the majority of people probably aren't addicted to drugs, and the majority of people probably don't recreationally use drugs. So if we were to have the majority of people make a decision for a minority of people who enjoy using drugs, that probably wouldn't be the best idea. I think that that would probably lead to a lot of problems. So when it comes to drug use, I think that a lot of that has to be dealt with through education, through proper consideration, through actually teaching people what drugs are all about, how the drugs affect you, what the dangers are, and not lying about the shit. I think that that would really help. And when it comes to drug abuse and when it comes to people being addicted to drugs, I really think that the way to solve those problems is to give people economic advantages so they don't end up in situations where they turn to drugs or alcohol or whatever as a bit of an escape. Because you see that a lot. I know that when I've been the most down ever, when I have nothing else, right? Sometimes you'll turn to drugs because, well, it lets you get the fuck out of your head for a little while and not focus on the terribleness that the world is giving you. So if people have economic stability, if people have a job, if people have things to do, if people have an enjoyable life, then they probably won't turn to drugs or alcohol to satisfy those needs. And as far as people using those sorts of things recreationally and for fun, they should be totally allowed to do that as long as they're not hurting anybody and they're properly educated on those things.
Why do MLs and ANCOMs keep fighting each other?
Why do MLs and ANCOMs keep fighting each other? They don't. That is a Twitter thing. That's a thing that happens pretty much exclusively online. I have recently been working with a lot more activists IRL, and I've asked every one of them this question because I'm an online person, right? I'm online all the fucking time, and I always hear this narrative that left unity is a joke, left unity isn't real, and all of these sorts of things. And that's not true. It's only true online. In real life, you got MLs working with anarchists, you got liberals working with conservatives, you got everybody working together to just achieve a goal. And everybody that's on the ground agrees with that. And a lot of people that are on the ground look at the things that the people online, especially on Twitter, are saying, and they laugh. They just think that it's the most childish. That's a an ageist term, but they look at it as being just absolutely petty and ridiculous and completely pointless and not helpful at all. So ANCOMs and MLs, they have fought in the past in wars and killed each other, and they have highly disagreed in the past on all sorts of things. And from that time, we've learned a lot, we've grown a lot, and we have thought a lot about the systems that we're in. And considering that we're coming on a completely new thing, something that we've never seen before, a new type of socialism based on the material conditions of the world that we live in today, the division between anarchists and MLs, I believe, actually have gotten a lot smaller. The gap between what we believe and the way we want to achieve it, it's very similar. It's a very, very, very tiny gap. There's not very many differences there. And a lot of people are going to shit on me for saying that. A lot of people are going to jump down my throat, and please feel free to, right? Well, we'll have conversations about it in the comment section. But what I've seen in real life is that people are out there fighting Nazis. People are out there doing direct action. People are out there doing mutual aid. And none of that sparks any kind of controversy between sects. All there ever is people working together and trying to get shit done. And then once in a while having a beer with one another and talking about different ideas and, on a level playing field and agreeing with each other most of the time. So, yeah, it's a Twitter thing.
What are your thoughts on Zizek and Chomsky?
Zizek and Chomsky? Chomsky, I have always loved Chomsky. He used to be the ASMR that I'd fall asleep to. Pretty much every time I turn on any video by Noam Chomsky, especially in his later years, he just has this like way of speaking that is so, I don't know, it's just perfect for me. And even thinking about it right now, I'm like, nap time. I just want to cuddle up in a blanket and fall asleep, which is upsetting because he says a lot of really interesting things. And I'm sure that I'm sure a lot of it seeps into my brain while I'm sleeping, but who knows? And his propaganda model, it wasn't specifically made by him, but it really, really, really excellent work. I think that the work that he did on propaganda is really, really smart. And Zizek is awesome. Zizek is fucking fantastic. I would try to do an impression right now, but I'd fall flat on my face with it. So yeah, I think that he makes a lot of really hot takes. He says some pretty inflammatory shit sometimes. I think he calls himself a pervert. But I think most of the things that he says make a lot of sense. I have agreements, I have disagreements, but yeah, he's a fun, interesting character.
Is anarchism inherently vegan?
No, I don't think anarchism is inherently vegan. But I definitely do see the overlap between vegans and anarchism and anarchists, in that vegans see here. This is a problem, right? Because now this gets into one of those places where I'm a bit of an old school. I almost have a conservative mentality on this, where I do understand the vegan mentality of putting people and animals on the same level. We are identical. We have emotions. We have thoughts. We have feelings, and we need to treat everything. We need to treat the animals as well as we treat humans. In fact, we need to treat humans better as well. So we need to treat everything a lot better than we do. I still personally, on a base level, I do see human beings as being not necessarily apart from nature, but not apart from nature at all. But I don't know. I'm still trying to figure this one out as far as I'm concerned, right? Because I don't want to say we're better than animals, because that's kind of a weird, like, fucked up thing to say. We all are at an evolutionary even point. We've all evolved to a certain point that we're essentially. But I still think that humans, as a human beings, and human life is more important. So I think that we need to solve the problems within humanity and take care of those problems first, and then handle the problems with animals. But I'm not 100% sold on that argument, because I've heard a lot of really good ones against it. So yeah, I can't give you a straight answer. I'm sorry.
How do you feel about anarchist spying? Open source intelligence, essentially grassroots surveillance technology. So anarchy versus privacy.
Like anarchists spying on people? Surveillance technology, so anarchy versus privacy. So anarchists are right now doing a lot of really great, are doing a lot of really great intel work. If you look at any one of the doxing channels on Twitter, or anywhere else on Instagram, I think as well, anarchists are doing wonderful work, finding out all kinds of things about Nazi organizations, infiltrating fascist groups, finding out when their rallies are happening, finding out what people are attending those rallies, finding out what the addresses are of those people that are attending those rallies. Anarchists have been doing a really good job with OPSEC and Intel. And I think that moving forward, more anarchists need to be getting involved in that sort of thing if they're useful in it. There is a massive need for computer engineers. There's a massive need for people that are good at gaining information and that sort of thing. So and that is just a tactic that we have to use. It's just as useful to us as it is to the enemy, and the enemy uses it all the time. Police and different fascist groups, they have dossiers of information on all of us, right? So in reality, most wars are fought through information, and gaining the most information is the best way of winning a war. So when you're at war, I would say that gaining information and doing that sort of thing is your most important goal. Eron, there isn't much difference between MLs and anarchists. That's kind of that was kind of put as a statement and not necessarily a question. And yeah, I would say that there are definitely differences between anarchists and MLs, but the majority of the differences that we have today, right, like in our modern futuristic society, they're more or less like semantic confused arguments that usually MLs have a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding of what anarchists mean, and anarchists have a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what MLs mean. So yeah, I don't think that there is that much of a division, at least not near as much of a division as most people on Twitter and YouTube would make you think that there is. But there is certainly definitely differences, right? Like a lot of MLs believe that you need to have some sort of daddy. I don't want to use that word, but some sort of leader that controls things so that you can have essentially a siege. What is it called? Siege communism. And for that, they think that you need to have a top-down hierarchy. And usually when I explain to MLs, well, hey, why would you need a top-down hierarchy for that when you could just form democratic associations that could create hierarchies as needed? They usually agree with that sort of thing, and they usually follow along with my mentality on that. So, but some people don't, and some people do think that you need to have a strong centralized command and leadership structure, blah, 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 blah. So there are some fundamental differences, but usually when we're talking about the differences, we're talking about theoretical things that are going to happen many, many years from now. It has no real basis in today.
How do you see current capitalist systems adapting to automation and thus removing capital as compensation from workers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really great question, and it's something that like I've talked about with my friends and partner several times about how once automation, we're almost at a race now between achieving full autonomy of the worker and having full automation of the workplace. And if full autonomy of the worker and the liberation of the people is not achieved before the full automation of the workplace, then the worker themselves loses a ton of bargaining power and ability to actually affect the system. One of the main strategies that leftists use in fighting against capitalism is the is the general strike. And if there are no workers in a workforce, if you're all replaced by machines, then doing a general strike isn't useful because you can't do it because you're not working anyway. So, which is a problem that we're going to have to face, and a lot of people are out of work right now. There's a massive number of reserved of people in the reserve army of labor, essentially unemployed people that the capitalists keep unemployed so that the rest of the workers will be scared of having their jobs replaced. And there are also a lot of people that are unemployed because of the economic recession and also because of the COVID-19 virus and that sort of thing. So the general strike, it even right now would lose some of its potency as opposed to sometime in the past when more people were employed. So to kind of counteract that, we need to be forming community organizations, community networks, Soviets, if you want to call them that. And that's one way to fight against that. But yeah, if to get back onto the question, if capitalists are able to essentially create all of the goods and services and whatever they need through automation, and they no longer need a workforce, then that workforce is unfortunately going to become burdensome on the system because they're not working to produce anything. So why should they be compensated? The people that are in control are going to look at these people that aren't doing anything and just needing to be compensated, or and just needing to still eat and drink and all of these things. And they're probably not going to see that as a benefit to them. And they might not keep them around very long, if you know what I'm saying. So kind of a depressing way to look at the future, but let's try to fight towards full emancipation rather than whatever the fucking capitalists want. This one here. So it says, hi, can you talk about moneyless society and how labor vouchers aren't just different money? Okay, so I'm not an advocate of labor. I'm not an advocate of labor vouchers. A moneyless society wouldn't necessarily use labor vouchers. It could, but I just basically see labor vouchers as being another abstraction of money, or another form of a type of money. Essentially, the idea behind labor vouchers, if I get this wrong, please feel free to correct me, is that you essentially have a system based on from each according to their ability, to each according to, or from each according to their work, to each according to their work. How does that go? From each according to their ability, to each according to their work. There we go. And the premise behind that is essentially that everybody inside of the society has to work so they can actually benefit from that society or get something out of that society. But that inherently creates a few major contradictions. One of those contradictions being that no matter how much you work, the amount of work that you put in is always going to be different from the amount of work that another person could put in on that exact same project. So there's no real way of 100% saying that this amount of work or this certain job that you're doing can be worth X amount of whatever, labor vouchers, money, anything, because the fundamental differences between your ability and another person's ability and a machine's ability is always going to skew that number. So there's no real way of ever actually quantifying the amount of work necessary to put into any specific good, service, or product. So as far as I'm concerned, labor vouchers don't fix that problem. Money doesn't fix that problem. What does fix that problem is a gift or sharing economics, where essentially you work in a system that if you produce in that system, you produce labor, you extract resources, you create goods, services, or whatever, then as long as you're doing that within the system, you are able to get out of that system whatever you're able to produce, whatever the workforce is able to produce. So you do the work in that system and you get out of it everything you need. So you work for free, and then you get everything you want for free. And that's basically the only way I think that we can actually function in a society and make things actually work properly. And people always jump in and say, well, how would you remunerate the doctors? How would you remunerate the people that are doing amazing work? And I would say that we can do that humanely and through human methods by actually talking to people within our communities and talking to the different people that are doing really difficult work, and making sure that they are getting rewarded for that work as they do it. Some people might get the great big house on the hill, and other people might get a fancy car or whatever it is, but we don't need to give people money to do those certain things. And a lot of the time, physical goods themselves really don't fill a hole or really don't give you the actual reward that you need. And sometimes it comes through admiration or through winning prizes and shit like that. Again, it's another very deep concept, and I have many videos on it.
What are your thoughts on anarcho-primitivism?
Anarcho-primitivism, I think that it's mostly misunderstood, just because I think that a lot of anarcho-primitivists probably aren't online talking about it a whole lot, being that they kind of reject technology. But as I've said before, maybe that's a misunderstanding because I haven't really heard a great argument for anarcho-primitivism. A lot of people fucking hate the idea. And I understand, I guess, why kind of a rejection of the future, the rejection of technology sort of idea that's kind of taken control of the whole meme. But I don't really even think that that's what it's about. I think it's more or less just a return to nature. I personally think that living more ecologically within our surroundings, having the city and the country and the and nature all kind of functioning together as one big ecosystem is the best possible solution. So I don't think that we should reject technology entirely, but I definitely think that we need to change the system that we have now into something more tenable.
Do you prefer state socialism like the USSR or Western liberalism like the US?
I prefer neither, but if I had to choose, Between Western liberal, if I had to choose between Western liberalism or state capitalism or state socialism, like in the Soviet Union, right now, I guess I would choose the Soviet Union because it's, or at least maybe right now, I guess I would choose the Soviet Union sometime during, and the later year. It's a crapshoot. It's really that's a really fucking tough question, because living in the time that I prefer living in Canada, honestly, which is kind of a mixed market economy, which has a liberal democracy and also capitalism, but we also have a strong welfare state, and I think that that's a superior model to the traditional capitalist system that the United States has, or the state capitalist system that the Soviet Union had. So yeah, I think the system that I live in right now is my preferred one. If I had to choose between the other two, that is a really fucking hard one, because you're really given equal levels of economic growth. Socialist countries usually perform better and give people better outcomes. So I guess I would say the Soviet Union, but it's a really tough one.
Do you have a theory list or any recommendations for theory? There's also a follow-up question if you want to read that first.
Follow up. There are a lot of companies that sell. Oh, sorry, it's jumping around. There are a lot of companies that sell to non-top capitalists. What will happen to their businesses once workers cannot buy their goods because they won't be paid post-automation, i.e. McDicks? There are a lot of companies that sell to non-top capitalists. I don't know what that means, non-top capitalists.
I don't think there's such a thing. Non-top capitalists.
I'm sorry, bear with me. I smoked a bunch of weed before I did this. What will happen to their businesses once workers cannot buy their goods because they won't be paid post-automation? Yeah, right. So that's a great question. So all of the different businesses that rely on workers to buy their goods, like McDonald's, like Amazon, like all of these different things, if automation creates a system where nobody needs to work, then that means that nobody will work, and that means that nobody will get paid. So then those businesses that rely on people to essentially work and get an income to buy their product wouldn't exist anymore, I guess. What an interesting question. And that's the problem with capitalism, is that it's inevitably a race to the bottom. You're talking about a system that deals with short-term mentality on all of this stuff. It's all about maximizing profit every quarter and reducing costs as much as possible. So and capitalism has no end goal, right? It just keeps devouring everything that it comes in contact with. Second Thought made a video about this recently, where he was saying that it's essentially like turning everything into a homogeneous gray goo, which capitalism does. It takes all of the matter, all of the material, all of the resources, all of the energy, all of everything, and creates commodities and goods or whatever the fuck it can sell until it can't extract any more resources anymore. That's the problem with living in a system that requires ever-increasing quarterly profits on a planet that has finite resources. It's fucking impossible. So eventually you run into the resources running out, or the labor force running out, or them maximizing production in such a way that people can't even buy things anymore. They could keep everything together through some sort of vampire economy. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I guess that would sort of work. They could kind of institute almost like a UBI, and maybe you would need to do some sort of busy work. I suppose that the service sector might still exist in some way, but even that could be replaced by machines if the machines are human enough. Yeah, capitalism has no plan, so it's just marching itself towards destruction. That's essentially the answer to the question.
What's your take on the white dreads dialogue?
White dreads? Oh, like white guys wearing dreads? I think that it's a silly argument. Dreadlocks, I've talked about this in other videos. They've existed as long as hair has existed. If you leave your hair alone and you let it mat up, it'll turn into locks. Dreadlocks specifically, I believe, is a terminology that was adopted from Jamaican culture, and I believe there was a certain group of warriors or something like that that had something known as dreadlocks, and they were called that because the people were dreaded. I don't know if there's 100% truth in that, but I think that's where the terminology came from. But as far as white people wearing matted hair or locked hair, it's existed since the beginning of time. Lots of different cultures have done it. It's had it has had a certain amount of symbolism in the past, and it also doesn't have symbolism in some situations. I personally have them because I'm a fan of, or at least when I first got them, I was a fan of nu metal and ICP and a bunch of like just terrible bands that nobody likes. And all of them wore dreadlocks. And I was a part of that culture. So I had them. And then now I've had them for over a decade. And it's just something that people recognize me with, right? They see me and they think, hey, you're the guy with the dreaded mohawk. Lots of Black people have seen my hair, and in real life, I've never, ever, not once, ever had any person of color ever say anything negative about it. It's usually overwhelming praise, and they want to just talk about how cool it looks, and they go and touch my hair.
What are your thoughts on Rojava?
My thoughts on Rojava is I really, really, really hope the best for all of those people. They're really great fighters. The military wing of the people there. What is it? Not the CNT. I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head, and I'm turning into a really, really poor anarchist for not remembering. But anyway, I think that they're awesome. I really hope that they're going to do the best. If the United States completely stops helping them out, if they haven't already. But they're really strong people. They're really great people. And I think that they will fight for their freedom and fight for their security and their land as long as they are able to. And I think that it's unfortunate that they had to use the United States so much to keep to kind of keep their system running. That part is very frustrating because it's essentially an anarchist country having to rely on a capitalist one so they can not get destroyed. But also, you never know what the material conditions are in those situations, and it's really hard to say from our very comfortable positions sitting on our couches or on our computer chairs talking about this now that we would have been able to do anything better. We could have, maybe some of us could have, maybe there might have been a million different other ideas that would have worked better. But we are where we are. So, and also the idea of democratic confederalism is a great one.
Does being a former neo-Nazi make it difficult to organize? How do you disclose that information to your organizing groups? As a former conservative, I could probably get away with not telling people, but I would feel better if I did. I want the people around me to feel as safe as possible.
Great point. I was never specifically a neo-Nazi. I was always rolling around. I was very far right adjacent, I would say. I had a lot of the ideas and beliefs, but I wasn't about to get a tattoo. I wasn't about to shave my head. I wasn't about to fly any flags, but I definitely was around a lot of people that did. So does that mean that we were 100% different from one another? Well, if I was to see me back then with the people that I was around, I would make the same association with me as I did with the rest of them. So there's that. As far as disclosing, me personally, I have a bit of a benefit there, or maybe not a benefit, maybe something that works against me, in that my history, my life has been very, very public. All of the things that I believed back in those days, I've talked about very openly on this channel several times and on many different places several times. So if people find out about me, they look through my history and they find out very quickly what my history was. But for an average person, I would say that disclosing that sort of thing can be a very touchy subject. And it really depends at what point of your journey you're on. If this was something that happened to you, and it is something that happens to you, it's like entering into a cult. If this is something that happened to you 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? It's not who you are anymore. And it might not even be the first thing that you think of when you enter into any kind of group. Usually you're thinking about ways to just achieve the goals that you are setting out to do. But if it's something that is sitting with you and it's something that you think would affect the people around you, then it is important to disclose those sorts of things and not to keep your past hidden from everybody, because it might make people of color, it might make marginalized groups or whatever feel as though you are untrustworthy. And if they find out that you were lying to them this entire time, or at least not or withholding the truth about that sort of thing the whole time, then you're going to have even harder of a time working with any of those people, because they are not going to trust you because you've already proven yourself to be a liar. So I think honesty is very important. And I also think that working in real life with people takes a certain amount of empathy and understanding that you just don't get online. And I have never actually had anybody have a problem with my past that I've worked with in real life. Everybody I've worked with has known about it, and it's never been a barrier for me. But it's also something that's happened many, many years ago. So it might be for you. Just be open, be honest, and be respectful, because some spaces are for us and others aren't, and we need to know when and where those are.
How do you believe should the left face the threat of right-wing militias?
Get organized, get training, get out there and start talking to people and growing your community networks and building actual unity among people on the ground. That's how you fight against that. We have to be organizing in such a way that we are able to counteract actual forces that are looking to destroy and kill us. A lot of right-wing militia groups all throughout the years have found their way into police forces. They've found their way into the FBI, the CIA. It's very prevalent in all of those cases, and they train a lot. I will say that they trained a lot more back in the 80s. The whole right-wing movement was a lot bigger back in those days. And even though there are a lot of guys from back in those days around still, a lot of them are fat, old, out of shape boomers who really don't pose much of a threat outside of their trigger finger. But there are a lot of young, impressionable white men, like the Proud Boys, like some of the younger 3%ers that are getting into all of this. Oath Keepers, Soldiers of Odin. They're getting into all of this. And they're young, and they are ready to prepare and train, and they do it a lot. I know something that I've tried to do, and my group has tried to do, is make friends with people that own gun stores and ranges. Make friends with people that own firearms, and make sure that the community that you're in knows that you aren't a threat, and in fact, you are a benefit to that community, because even if those people don't 100% politically align with you, they will come to bat for you if something bad happens. And outside of that, join the SRA. If you don't want to join the SRA because you don't want your name on any sort of list, I understand that. It makes total sense. Get out there and train. Find some way that you can indiscriminately go to a range and learn things. And not just learning how to train, how to shoot, but also other things as well. Making sure that you know how to fight. Making sure that you know, making sure that you're staying in the best shape that your body allows you to be in. How to detect threats. That's a big one. Learning the basic strategies of a lot of these different groups, specifically the police. Yeah, all of those things are really important. Get out there and get training, because they are not going to fucking take it easy on you, and best be fucking sure that they are doing training. So if you aren't, then you're already behind.
What are your favorite bands?
My favorite bands, the Insane Clown Posse, Twisted, ABK. I also really like some classic rap. classic rap. That's what we're gonna call it now. Busta Rhymes, obviously Dr. Dre. I'm not super keen on Eminem just because that shit's so fucking played out, but I like I like some older Ludacris songs. They're fucking dope. I like Korn. Just the worst, right? I really like Slipknot still to this day. There's some more contemporary thing. I like Doja Cat. Doja Cat's pretty dope. Snotty Nose Rez Kids, fucking amazing. Check out Snotty Nose Rez Kids. That's the fucking soundtrack to the revolution. What's the other one? A Tribe Called Red. A Tribe Called Red, literally the soundtrack to the revolution. Fucking listen to that because it's so good. So good.
Tactics-wise, what do colonized USA Black Bloc groups need to develop and explore while practicing direct actions in order to prepare for the revolution?
Okay, so tactical Black Bloc groups, what we need to do, hey, all you tactical Black Bloc groups out there, what we need to do is we definitely need to be fighting reactively, to threats that are happening within our societies. We need to be out there and protesting. We need to be out there protecting people at protests. We need to be doing the work that we have been doing. But all of this stuff is reactive, right? It's all reacting to a scenario. Someone gets murdered, we go out and protest. We grab our umbrellas and our gas masks and all of that, and we try to defend and protect people. Some sort of bill gets passed, and it destroys people's lives. Immigrants are being snatched up out of their houses. We go and react to that. Nazis show up in our town. We go and react to that. That's all very important. We need to do that. And I'll talk about that sort of thing. I'll talk about tactics in a second. But we have to be doing more than that. We have to be using this time to build. Right now, we're in a situation, we're in a time period. It's almost like the eye of the storm, where a lot of bad shit happened in 2019 and 2020, a pandemic, an economic depression, tons of people losing their jobs, all massive protests, all of this. The reverberation from that is going to take time. It's going to take about 5 to 6 years. I'm going to say around 3 to 8 years. In that time period, we need to work very, very hard to start building structures that can support us in the new world. If there is to be a new world, we need to fucking build it now. So we can't be acting reactively. We have to be acting proactively, and we have to be building the dual power structures we need to actually obtain the goals that we need in the future. As far as tactics for Black Bloc, there are a lot of important things that you need to know. First of all, if you are getting masked up and going out there in shields and with protective gear, know right now that there is a very strong chance that you are going to be arrested, and everything that you have on you is going to be considered a weapon or is going to be considered a riot weapon, and you're going to get additional charges for that. So not only will you be thrown in jail for whatever, protesting, being out past curfew, all of those sorts of things, you'll also get weapons charges. You'll also get all sorts of other things. So remember that. Just be very, very fucking careful when you're going out there. Some of the things that you need to know is if you don't bring your phone, if you have to bring your phone, make sure that it is a burner phone, or the lock screen isn't something that's a facial recognition, thumbprint, or anything like that. Make sure that it's a passcode, preferably a long one. If you're going to be dressing in any kind of block, make sure that it's mission specific. Black bloc is a very specific thing that needs to be done when you're trying to create a presence. Black bloc essentially means that you're dressing all in black with a hoodie, mask, probably shields, flags, that sort of thing. What you're doing is you're essentially producing a homogenous line of people that look like a unified group. And that's important for intimidation. That's important for unity. That's important for a lot of different things. But it also paints a massive target on your back, because if you're dressed in black bloc, you got a shield, the cops are coming after you, or an umbrella, or a leaf blower. Those things the gear is very important. Make sure that you look into what kind of gear you want. But as I said, it's mission specific. So if your role isn't to go in and protect a group, right, which is what the umbrella brigades do, and what people with the leaf blowers do, then you might consider doing gray block. And gray block just essentially means that you're wearing regular clothes. You're trying to look like a normal protester, a normal person. And you're essentially hiding your power level. And you do this when you don't have large numbers. You do this when you're trying to do OPSEC. You do this when you're trying to get information, that sort of thing. So make sure that everything that you do is mission specific. As far as gear is concerned, I don't want to talk a whole lot about that because I could go on and on and on forever. Just make sure that you're wearing things that will protect you with impact. What is it called? Impact injuries. Usually police are supposed to bounce rubber bullets and rubber grenades and stuff like that off the ground to hit you, but they will hit you directly. So limbs, eyes, chest, basically everything. Try to make sure that you stay protected.
Sorry.
We're coming up to an hour now, so
Nice.
I
want to get together in my area to make a community fridge, but I live with someone at risk, so it's not best to go door to door. Do you have any helpful tips with this?
Yeah, sure. So going door to door isn't necessarily going to work for every single person. I would suggest, though, that if there is a way for you to talk to somebody that doesn't live in your house, that isn't with somebody that's at risk, for them to go and do that instead. And even to, if you can, make up pamphlets, make up scripts, all of those sorts of things, so another person can go door to door for you. You're never going to get better results than actually talking to people in real life. It's just impossible. Talking to people online is flaky. Trying to talk to people on the phone is impossible. So yeah, trying to get there in real life is the most important. If there's no real way to do that, I would also say, though, too, that you can actually involve yourself in going door to door and doing that sort of thing safely if you're wearing a mask and you're also making sure that your hands are sanitized. And when you knock on the door, you stand back 6 or 8 feet, come down off the step and talk to somebody from a little bit of a ways away. I've had a lot of really good results doing that, and people are more receptive to that sort of thing. So you can definitely still go door to door, and I would really, really encourage people to do that. If you can't, obviously, then go to your Facebook, go to Twitter less so. What Instagram is another good one, and you can usually build movements or at least start movements through those sorts of methods.
In the event of revolution, how would you defend the gains made by the proletariat from fascists, reactionaries, and bourgeois sympathizers without the use of state apparatus?
Right. So this question comes with the misunderstanding of how anarchism works. Sorry if that's rude to say, but when we're talking about the state apparatus, right? When we're talking about using the state to be able to hold on to control over our socialism, what we're talking about isn't necessarily the state itself. We're talking about the tools that the state uses. And one of the tools that the state uses to hold on to and maintain control and power like that is the military, right? And anarchists have no problem with using a military. Diversity of tactics is very important. We just believe that the military should be structured in a ground-up, democratic, decentralized way rather than a top-down hierarchical structure. But within that military, there can also be temporary hierarchies that form to create basically a cohesion when we're going into certain activities. For instance, if a general or a sergeant has to know certain tactics that the rest of the people on the ground can't know because they might be a liability, then there would obviously be a natural hierarchy that formed in that situation. Or people that are more knowledgeable or more adept at certain situations would naturally become the top of a hierarchy in as long as they were doing that one job, and then hopefully afterwards those hierarchies would dissolve.
What are your thoughts on syndicalism?
My thoughts on syndicalism. I think it's a great idea. I think that our modern day encourages us to do more than syndicalism. Syndicalism is, for those of you who don't know, is essentially unionizing, workers' unions. I think that we need essentially a super syndicalism that doesn't only involve workers' unions, but also involves tenants' unions, local organizations, direct action groups, community defense groups, all of those sorts of things. We have to create a mosaic, right? A coalition, a rainbow coalition of all of the different types of groups that we have. People that are fighting for civil rights, social justice, all of those people. We need to all work together collectively, cooperatively, so we can actually achieve our goals. So I think that syndicalism is great, but we need to go beyond our basic primitive understanding of it.
Is state socialism a necessary step towards anarchism?
No. Nope. State socialism is not a necessary step towards anarchism. State socialism, I would say, is a deviation from the goals of anarchism, because state socialism implies that you're going to try to create a stateless, classless, moneyless society by using a state, a class, and money, or labor vouchers, or some sort of remuneration, and also using a centralized structure that creates a top-down hierarchy. All of those things are inherently anti-anarchistic. And the old saying goes, the means you use to obtain your object soon themselves become your object. And if the means that you use to obtain your object are a dictatorship or a top-down hierarchy, then your object will eventually become maintaining that hierarchy. So no, absolutely not.
What would decolonization look like in the United States?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I think that's something that you would have to ask somebody that is fighting for land back and any of those things. I know a lot about anarchist theory. And as far as decolonization goes, I don't know enough. I know what it is, and I don't know enough about it to really speak to exactly what people that are pro decolonization want. And that's just because I haven't had the time to look so deeply into it that I can make like a coherent argument for or against it. I would more or less say that I think that I'm probably for some sort of decolonization. But yeah, I can't give you an in-depth one on that. And we are at the 1 hour mark. So I am going to take a few more questions, but I really want to encourage people, if you can, send in those super chats. Those kind of questions are going to get the what do you call it? Are going to get priority. Oh my goodness, the weed's wearing off. Send in super chats. Those kind of questions get priority, and we'll talk about those first. And we're probably going to go for about another 10, 15 minutes or so.
There was a question about music. What type of music inspires you in what you say or do?
The type of music that inspires me lately, like really, really in a big way, like I said, A Tribe Called Red is a really inspirational band. And a lot of the music that they produce, whenever I feel it, it makes me get up, it makes me energized, and it makes me want to fight. And I don't mean physically fist fight people. I mean, fight for a better future, fight for a better tomorrow. So yeah, that music really inspires me. And you know, a lot of the old, what do you call it? Nu metal bands like Slipknot inspire me, but you know, kind of in a different way.
What are your thoughts about third world socialist countries, and do you think that a socialist revolution will come from the global south?
Yeah, I just had this question asked me the other day. So I do think that, essentially we're talking about third worldism, and that the revolution will essentially start in the third world, and the Western world has to work towards allowing that sort of thing to happen. And I agree with that to a certain extent. I think that people that are marginalized, people that are under authoritative regimes, people that are not doing so well economically are always going to be the people that are going to rise up first. And you can even see that in the West. The people that are the most ready to fight back and fight against the system are the most marginalized people, and the people who haven't seen any good from the last little bit of history. So obviously, that's why we see people like people of color, Native Americans, indigenous people of all different stripes, leading the revolution, leading all of these causes, because they know better than any of us how all of this shit is going down. They know better than all of these white people who are just now hearing about oppression, that it's real and that we can fight against it, and they have ways of fighting against it. One of the best models that we have right now for a modern socialist revolution in the West, is the Black Panther Party. They came up with a lot of really great ideas. I think if we mix that with a lot of our modern understanding of things and with anarchist structural analysis, I think that we really do have a futuristic model of socialism that we can work towards. Did I answer that question properly? Okay.
Besides the entertainment we already have, what would a form of entertainment look like in a communist society?
I think that in a communist society, it would just be like thirst traps, like that. It just constant porny posting. That's the most entertaining thing, I think. No, I'm just kidding. I think that in a communist society, there would be entertainment would be more democratic, and more of the people would have more of a say in what is being produced. So I think that the things that really made YouTube popular and the things that really made a lot of these social media platforms popular at the very beginning, like the self-made comedians and people doing DIY stuff and like just interesting people in general, I think those sorts of things would probably be the more prevalent forms of entertainment in the future. And not so much being held on and not so much being influenced by a massive organization or a conglomerate or like a media giant like we have right now.
Are pacifists useful in the to the movement? I make a much better gardener than a fighter, plus violence and injustice kind of turns my stomach.
Yeah, pacifists are absolutely useful to the movement as long as the pacifists are not going to get in the way of the people using a diversity of tactics. That is the main thing, right? Be pacifist as much as you want. Be as peaceful as possible, right? And we need that. We need many people doing many different things. The perfect place for a pacifist is when a camera is rolling, when people are watching and the optics are right there. Then having people that are peaceful and not fighting and not throwing water bottles and not starting fires and not rattling fences, that's the best place to be. Because when you're being filmed, you can't show any bit of aggression or violence at all, because it gets painted in the media as being wholly terrible. Obviously, we as anarchists and socialists and leftists cannot control what the media says about us, and they will always paint us in the worst possible light. But sometimes it's important for us to try to at least manipulate that in our favor and show people in the real world that we're not violent, we're not evil, we're not scary, we're not criminals. And yeah, so I think that that's the best place for pacifists.
Do you think socialist anarchists joining SOCDEM orgs and running for leadership roles is an effective way of expanding the non-cap left?
Yeah, kind of. I think that the social democratic orgs like the DSA and so forth, they are good. I think that the best thing that you can get from them is getting to know people in your community that are more radically minded. Usually in your DSAs, you're going to have a lot of young people, and you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be moving towards more radical positions. And I think that's a great place for you to get in contact with a lot of those people and work to organize. As far as like, I don't know, infiltrating those groups and trying to become one of the higher ups, I don't think that I think that would work about as well as trying to infiltrate any group and trying to get to one of the echelons, like one of the top echelons, like the Democratic Party. I think the systems that are already in place, they're going to have an easier time manipulating and corrupting you than you will be able to unmanipulate and uncorrupt that system. Not saying the DSA is wholly corrupt, but in some cases, especially lately, they have been shown to push all kinds of state propaganda. So it's something to keep in mind.
Can internet exist under the ideal ANCON society?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that the internet would exist even more in a would exist even freer in an ANCOM society, because you wouldn't have these multinational giant conglomerate corporations maintaining control over all of it. I think that speech and what can and can't be said on a lot of these platforms could become too democratically. I think that the opportunity to allow people to freely express the way they think, feel, and believe to one another is a great thing. And I think that it needs to be promoted. And it's unfortunate that right now so many people are making so much money off of it. So yeah, in the future, that would definitely happen. And also eliminating intellectual property rights, along with having a very strong internet, would really allow us to flourish in a major way, and be able to disseminate information and technology and that sort of thing between ourselves really, really, really well.
How would anarchy work in cities?
Anarchy works in cities the same way that it would work anywhere else. In a large building, in a skyscraper, where you have a bunch of residents, you might have 100 people on like the top 3 floors, and then another 100 people below that. So community building in that situation is a little different than community building in a town. Because you're going to be talking to people within your building as opposed to people that are living, across the street or whatever down the road. And I think that so it's different in that way. But you also, if you all live inside of a building or all live on a city block, a lot of the time, all of those buildings are owned by the same person or same group of people, same property management company. So organizing together with people inside of your own building or people inside of your block works towards actually building tenants unions a lot faster than it would if everybody around you owned their own property or were renting property from various different owners. So I actually think that it gives a lot of really interesting advantages.
You have 3 more questions on here.
Oh, okay. I got 3 more questions. Is this a new super chat here?
No.
Oh, okay. So I got 3 more questions. If you want to ask any more super chats, throw those in. And after that, we're going to be wrapping it up.
Will you ever do a tier list of socialist countries?
No, probably not. A tier list of countries would be so difficult because there are so many goods and so many bads. Like, by what criteria would I, aside from just an arbitrary, like, I like this one better? I don't think that I could create a tier list. They're all important. They're all things that we need to study. I hate tier lists. I fucking hate tier lists.
Regarding your video on the Vanguard Party, without a centralized party, wouldn't the parties fight each other rather than band together? I think each would develop disagreements, however small, which would drive a wedge of conflict and cause infighting rather than fighting to dismantle the existing system. How could this be prevented?
Okay, so yeah, it's absolutely possible. But what you're looking at for the alternative is having one group gain control and maintain a hierarchical structure, essentially a centralized state, as kind of the counter to that. And I don't think that that's the solution, right? So is it possible that a bunch of different anarchist groups would conflict with one another? Yeah, probably. Just like how a lot of different capitalist countries conflict with one another now. But there's no ruler of the entire world. There's no one guy that says, this is how everything on the entire planet must function. So therefore, China has to do this and America has to do that. There are world superpowers that have a fuck ton of influence. I'm not going to say that they don't. But more or less, countries interact with one another through trade, negotiation, agreement, and less and less more frequently through conflict. So I think that there is a strong working model right now of how different countries are able to work with one another that we can use as a basis for the way that we can work with one another. Will there be conflict? Absolutely. Will we be able to solve those conflicts? Hopefully, but I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know what all of those conflicts will be in the future. All we can do is try to mitigate them. So,
how about a discussion on socialist institutions in America before the Red Scare, and how might we implement them again given current material conditions?
Yeah, socialist institutions before the Red Scare in America, they were starting to gain a large amount of traction. Even back before Eugene Debs and all of those people, FDR, there were a lot of strong anarchist and communist groups. The IWW, for one, was a very strong anarchist group or leftist group. I would say that they were anarchist for the most part. That was fighting in America right from the very start. A lot of really brilliant anarchist thinkers came out of America, or at least lived there for a very long time. So I think that it was really excellent. And then I think that the Red Scare really stopped people from thinking that anarchist and communist and socialist ideas were tenable and useful. And there was a lot of propaganda that was pushed to change people's perception of that. I think that now the internet by itself has done an amazing job to counteract a lot of that negative stigma. And but we can see it right now that there is a new Red Scare going on as we speak. All throughout the Trump administration, we had the Russia baiting, the constant Russia is creating false tweets or false Facebook posts that are influencing votes, and Russia's bad, and this, that, and the other thing. And now, at the latter end of Trump's administration and fully into the into the Biden administration, we have strong rhetoric against China. Everybody's anti-China. China bad. China bad. China bad. And this is red baiting. This is a new Red Scare. It's meant to terrify everybody. I would suggest, if you get some time, go research China, because it's a really interesting place and it's not nearly as scary as you think it is. But yeah, I think that the way that we fight against that is we push back hard right now. And before we are fully engulfed in a new Cold War, a new red Cold War, we need to fight against that propaganda. Oh, that's it? Okay, perfect. That's all. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I had a really good time doing this. I hope you all had a good time watching. And I guess I'll see you next time. So until then, bye-bye. Keep evolving.